Welcome back to Whispers at Night. Tonight, true November horror stories. Nights that smell like smoke and frost, and roads that end where the light dies. The air's colder now, windows fog faster, and somewhere someone's walking home alone under a burnt orange street lamp. Before we start, like and subscribe, and comment where you're watching from and what the weather's like tonight. It helps the stories find the ones who still listen after midnight. Leaves frozen to the ground, voices in the wind. Ready? Let's begin. My name is Tessa. I'm 36 and I've been making late-night runs between Madison and Milwaukee since I finished nursing school back in 2010. I'm the text mom when you're home type. The seat warmers on, podcast going, cruise control set kind of driver. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I left my aunt's place a little after 10. Belly full of pie. The interstate mostly empty. The moon sitting low and flat like a dented coin. I had a true crime show droning through the speakers. The host talking about team tactics predators use on highways. When my headlights rolled across something moving along the shoulder, I lifted off the gas. At first I figured deer, there's never just one. But the shape was wrong. Smaller, blotchy coat, head low. As I drew even, I saw a brown and white dog, maybe 35 pounds, dragging a back leg like it barely worked. I eased onto the shoulder with my hazards on, engine idling. The nurse part of me took over before the human part really thought it through. I keep an old fleece blanket behind the passenger seat for car accident shock, or shivering patients. That night I pictured wrapping the dog, driving straight to the emergency vet off Blue Mound. Doing the Good Samaritan thing, sleeping better for it. When I cracked my door, the dome light washed the asphalt in pale yellow. The dog stood about 15 feet away, facing me, whole body shivering, tail down. It didn't run, which I told myself meant it needed help. I was halfway out of the seat when another vehicle rolled up behind me. No big deal, right? Cars stop for each other out there. But this one killed its headlights and left only the parking lights on. Faint orange glows like eyes in the dark. The car idled about a car length back. Both front doors opened at the same time, perfectly together like someone had counted it down. 2 people stepped out. The light from their cabin flashed on their faces for a second before the doors shut. A broad-shouldered man in a cap, and a smaller person I read as male from the stride. They moved like they had a place to be, and I was it. "Buddy, there you are," the smaller one called, his voice pitched loud and friendly in the quiet. "Come here, pal." It sounded like the way a stranger pretends to know your kid to see if you'll relax. I glanced at the dog. Nothing. No ear twitch, no tail flick, no shift toward the sound. The bigger one started making soft kissing noises, the kind you use on a puppy, but his feet were carrying him toward my front door, not toward the animal between us. My hand was still on the door. The smaller one raised his palms like a peace offering and said, "Ma'am, could you give us a hand? He spooks with men. If you could catch him, we can get him in the car." That was the moment the world snapped into focus. They weren't looking at the dog. They were looking at me. I slid my leg back inside, slammed the door, stabbed the lock button with my thumb. The big guy broke into a sprint the instant he heard the lock. I'd barely pulled my hand away when his fist hit the glass. The thud was deep enough to shake the door in its frame. His face flattened against the window, mouth moving. The smaller one hustled to the passenger side and yanked the handle, once, twice, then hammered the glass with the heel of his hand. My brain scattered. My shifter felt far away. I knocked my knee on the column, cursed, slapped the lever down. In the mirrors, all I could see were bodies and darkness, and just beyond his shoulder, the other car's open doors, left gaping like someone expected to jump back in. I didn't risk reverse. I stabbed the gas and shot forward, tires chirping against the cold. The big man stumbled away from my door. The smaller one lunged and missed my mirror by inches. The dog didn't move. It stood with that leg cocked wrong, a statue in fur while everything else blurred. At 70, I realized I was shaking hard enough that the wheel quivered in my grip. I kept going. The next open, bright place on that stretch is a truck stop by an exit with a billboard for fireworks. 3 miles that felt like 30. I took it fast, pulled right up in front of the doors under the brightest lights I could find, and dialed 911 with hands that wouldn't settle. The dispatcher's voice was steady and practical. She kept me talking. Where I was, which direction I'd been heading, any description I could manage. Dark sedan, I said. Older. No front plate, I noticed. One tall, heavy build, baseball cap. The other smaller, both in dark clothes. She told me to stay put, lock the doors, and wait for a trooper who was already nearby. He arrived within minutes. Lights off so he didn't blow past me. I watched him in the rear view until the shape of his hat made me breathe. He took my statement in the lot, radioed a unit to sweep the mile marker I'd given, then looked me dead on and said, "You did everything right." He added, almost like it hurt to say, that I wasn't the first to call that month. "Same stretch," he said. "Injured animal." 2 subjects. Approach from both sides. When I mentioned how the dog didn't respond to either of them, no perk of recognition, no flinch at the shouting, he nodded. "We've seen dogs trained to stay put," he said. "Sometimes even to limp. They get rewarded for freezing through noise." It knocked the air right out of me. Someone had taught a living thing to hold still, while people pounded on glass inches away. Another officer checked in by radio 20 minutes later. "Fresh tire marks where I'd pulled over," he said. "No other vehicles now, no animal. No cameras on that stretch either. The kind of in-between zone that looks safe enough to stop until it isn't. They upped patrols along that corridor for a while. As far as I know, they didn't catch the pair." The trooper gave me his card and told me to call if I remembered a detail. Bumper sticker, dent, anything. And to switch up my route for a bit. He also told me something I've thought about every time I pass that exit. The tree line there hides a web of old service roads that snake back through county land. In winter, they're rutted and forgotten. With the right truck and a plan, you could vanish a mile from the interstate and never be seen. I didn't tell my mom. She called the next morning like always and asked if I'd made it home. And I said yes and told her the cranberry sauce turned out great. I told everyone else, co-workers, my book club, the barista who works nights. Women who drive alone learn to pass information the way our grandmothers passed recipes. Specific. Non-dramatic, meant to be used. Because here's what stuck with me after my heart rate calmed. The choreography. Doors open in unison. Lines delivered like they'd practiced. The perfect prop. The empty road at a holiday hour when law enforcement is stretched thin dealing with fights and DUIs. You don't stumble into that level of timing. You build it. I went online and found threads from long-haul drivers and EMTs that could have been copy-paste. Decoys on lonely roads. Help me with this baby carrier. My tire's flat, can you come look? Hey, that's our dog. 2 people flanking a stopped vehicle before the driver can think. The specifics change with the state line. The bones are the same. People want to be good. Predators know that and write scripts that use it against us. I still make the trip to see family. After dark, I take the slower route that winds through town lights and past open gas stations. It adds 20 minutes. It also adds neighbors, cameras, and lit windows. Things that make bad plans harder to execute. I think about the dog more than I want to. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe it had been trained for this from puppyhood. Maybe it was a stuffed decoy in moonlight and my brain filled in the breathing. Because I expected breath. I don't know which possibility is worst. Mostly, I think about other drivers. The ones who stopped before me. The ones who'll stop after. The ones who didn't keep the engine running. Who stepped farther from their door than they realized. Who couldn't get the gear engaged in time. Families who live with a hole in the shape of a person. And a set of hazards blinking alone on the shoulder. On a cold night. So here are the rules I follow now and keep telling anyone who will listen. If you pull over, leave the engine on. Keep your seat inside the car and your foot ready. If you want to help an animal, call in the mile marker and let law enforcement or a road service handle it. If another car arrives dark and both doors open at once, put the transmission in drive and go. Even if your brain says you look rude. If anything about a voice sounds rehearsed, believe your body first. You can always circle back with a second car or from a lit place. You owe politeness to no one on the shoulder in the middle of the night. I am grateful for how little actually happened. No broken window, no pulled handle on my side, no hands on me. But it was enough. The interstate looks different now. I watch the tree line and the gaps in the guardrail, and the places a sedan could tuck its nose out of sight. I still text my mother when I get home. Still listen to podcasts. And when the show says predators work in pairs, I don't nod along like it's trivia. I picture two doors opening together on a quiet Wisconsin highway, and a dog that didn't blink. A week after they arrested him, I went back with the landlord to pack what I'd left. Daylight made the hallway look normal. Scuffed baseboards, flyers curling on a bulletin board, the smell of warm laundry. Yet my legs still felt hollow when the key turned. I called out first just to hear a voice in the air. Then I pushed the door with my shoulder, the landlord behind me with a cardboard box and a nervous laugh. The living room matched the evidence photos, window frame tarped, cushions stacked wrong, a drawer hanging open like a crooked mouth. I took new pictures anyway. One of the new strike plate the landlord had installed, one of Cooper's chewed rope toy on the rug, because it felt like proof we once lived here. The air held the ghost of mustard. I could see the spot on the counter, where the half sandwich had sat under a plastic baggie that Tex forgot. That detail made my stomach tip. We didn't linger. I filled 2 boxes with what I actually used and left the rest for a hall crew. The landlord kept apologizing for the fire escape, the loose window latch, the door that never latched unless you slammed it. He meant well. I told him I was moving across town. He nodded like he'd expected it. The new place was ground floor in a beige, boring building with an on-site manager who fixed things the day you asked. The front door's deadbolt thunked deep like a safe. I swapped the bedroom knob to a keyed lock and dropped a metal bar in the patio slider track. Not pretty, but honest. I slept with a door brace and the radio on quiet jazz. No play-by-play, just soft notes that let real sounds stand out. Cooper adjusted first. Dogs don't write speeches about second chances. They learn the route to the nearest patch of grass and map a home by nose. He walked the new perimeter with his head down, closed every invisible gap, and curled by the slider where the night smell leaked in. I watched him like a compass. If his hackles rose, we crossed the street. If he hesitated at the threshold, I waited in the hall and texted the manager to join me. He never made me feel silly. You pay rent, he said. You get peace. Detective Reeves called a few days later. Practical voice, steady pace. They'd matched tread marks from my hallway to boots in his trunk and found small things taken from other apartments. Cheap jewelry, a kid's game controller, a handful of mail. The notebook was the worst. Addresses, rough sketches, notes like walks dog 9:30, leaves TV on. My unit was in there. She asked if I wanted to write something for the judge. I said yes, then stared at a blank page for 3 nights because nothing sounded like the truth under my skin. In the end, I wrote plain. I moved. I wake up at small sounds. I'm building a quiet life, but it's work, and I didn't choose it. When snow returned, it came soft, making the patio a clean sheet. I stood at the slider with my hand on the handle and felt the old surge zip up my spine. Perfect snow had a new meaning now. I opened the door, leaned out, and dragged a crooked line across the drift with the broom. It was nothing, but it made the cold air feel ordinary again. Cooper jammed his muzzle into the stripe and sneezed, proud of himself for ruining the smoothness. I laughed. The sound surprised me. Work shifted me earlier. I told my boss it was about the bus, but really it was so Cooper and I wouldn't be outside at our old hour. Friends started texting at odd times. Home safe? I answered with pictures. Of boring things on purpose, pasta boiling, laundry folded, Cooper asleep with his chin on the coffee table like a tiny gentleman. Boring felt like a win. Court day arrived with pale sun and a line at security. The bench looked a mile high from the cheap seats. When they said 18 months, it sounded like an equation, not a measure of harm. A woman in the back row made a thin sound and covered her mouth. When my turn came, my throat tried to close. I didn't mention the sandwich. I said I still hear a quiet laugh outside my bedroom door when the room is dark and the fridge kicks on, and that the small things become the fence around your days. I don't know if it mattered. The judge didn't look up. Weeks passed and panic shifted from a flood to a single cold hand I could move off my shoulder. I met the neighbor downstairs, a woman my age with a toddler who called every dog Swooper. We swapped spare keys and made a rule. If either of us texted "come over," the other came without questions. She brought muffins one Sunday. I gave her a door wedge wrapped in tissue like a joke. We laughed, then slid it under her knob and left it there. On a normal afternoon, I drove past the old block because I was already in that part of town. The building looked smaller. The fire escape clung to the brick like a bent ladder. The window I'd once peered up at was just glass reflecting tree branches and a slice of sky. I sat through a green light, then moved on. In daylight, with strangers living their lives behind those panes, it was only a building again. In March, Reeves called about a parole hearing. I could attend or send another letter. I chose the letter. I wrote about routine, about checking locks without bitterness most nights, about texting my mother home safe and feeling the words land gently. I wrote about a dog who chose the patio as his post and made the night smaller by 10 feet. Spring loosened the city. The hardware clerk learned my name and the size of screws I always forgot. I taught myself to rekey a lock at the kitchen table with a tutorial paused on my phone. Tiny springs lined up like bones. I hung a motion camera by the slider and nearly jumped out of my skin at the first alert. It was a squirrel hauling a slice of pizza with a heroic focus. I saved the clip and emailed it to Reeves with a line. Best suspect yet. One evening I came home and saw the living room curtain tilted just a touch. My breath went shallow. I set my bag down and knocked on my own door. Cooper stared, tail level. I listened for the cough that changed my life, and heard only the hall radiator clanking to itself. I phoned my neighbor and asked her to stay on the line while I unlocked. Inside smelled like soap and nothing else. I straightened the curtain and laughed at myself. Kindly, not cruelly. The body keeps its own records. Heat took the city in June. I signed up for a Saturday self-defense class at the rec center anyway. The mat smelled like gym and bleach. We practiced saying no from the ribs, practiced stepping off the line, turning a wrist, using leverage. An instructor half my size put me on the ground twice, then showed me how to do it back. I left with shaky legs and a surprising calm. Power was technique and permission to take up space. The shelter needed volunteers, so on my day off I walked. A nervous brindle named Poppy around the back lot until the shaking left her shoulders. Cooper sniffed my jeans when I returned, offended but forgiving. It felt good to give attention to a creature without a voice. It made something steadier for an hour. I kept going back. I'd come home with fur stuck to my shirt and a list of who needed extra laps next time. Summer slid toward fall. My mother stopped using that careful tone when she asked about the apartment. She texted recipes, sent a photo of my father asleep with the remote on his chest, said she liked the patio basil even if it looked like a weed. I replied with Cooper pictures, one with his tongue crooked, one in a party hat because the toddler insisted he needed one. We celebrated with 2 ice cubes in his bowl and a short walk before the sun got hot. Late July, someone knocked just before midnight. 3 quick taps. The old fear moved through me clean and bright. Cooper stood but didn't vibrate. No growl, just alert. I checked the peephole. A delivery driver with too many boxes and a weary face. Wrong door, I said. He read a number 2 doors down. I watched him hand off the food and texted, "Emergency carbs." My neighbor replied, "We do not judge." I took a slice at her table, and we watched a silly show where the villain always gets caught because the script demands it. By August, Reeves emailed to say she was transferring precincts. She promised I could still go through dispatch and asked for more animal videos when the world got heavy. I sent the pizza squirrel again, and a clip of Cooper snoring like a person. She replied with a cat glaring at a plant, and the sentence most. People say without meaning it, "You did everything right." From her, it landed. The first cold front sharpened the edges of the city. I replaced the weather stripping, oiled a hinge, learned which click meant the deadbolt seated clean. The apartment started to sing normal songs, kettle tick, dryer hum, the bus sighing at the corner. I slept through the night twice in a row and woke astonished, then guilty, then grateful. Grief and fear don't walk straight lines. Some days I felt fierce. Some days I cried at a commercial. Mostly I did the dishes and took the dog out and kept batteries charged. A small package sat on my mat one evening. No return address, my name in block letters. Every molecule woke up. I photographed it, texted a question mark. From me, my neighbor replied. Stop being dramatic and open it. Inside was a doorbell camera. We split the cost because the owner shrugged at upgrades. We installed it ourselves and watched the app ping a clear photo of our own sweaty faces. We high-fived in the hall like kids. A small square of view can't save a life, but it can make this one feel less alone. Snow returned in November, the early kind that whispers and melts by noon. I made coffee and drew a crooked line in the drift. A habit now, not a ritual. Cooper dug a trench until he sneezed himself backward and looked offended. I took a photo and filed it in a folder labeled Us. Screens hold dumb things, but they can also hold a life. The curtain straight, basil thick, broom stripe in clean snow. A dog blinking in pale sun. An unknown number texted one night near winter. Hey, long time. How are you? No name, no context. The area code wasn't local. My heart kicked. I didn't respond. I blocked, then sat on the floor with my back against the couch because my knees forgot what to do. Maybe it was a wrong number, maybe not. Either way, I chose the quiet path that let me sleep. Parole was denied that first time, then scheduled again for the next year, the system turning whether or not you want it to. I wrote another letter that second winter. I said I had built a life again, but it was built with vigilance I didn't ask to learn. I said I checked my curtain not because I loved drama, but because my body remembered a laugh in a hallway, a drawer sliding, a breath that wasn't mine. Maybe they read it. The act of writing rewired something anyway. The go bag by the door stayed light. Spare keys, phone charger, a copy of my ID, $20, Cooper's vet card, a photo of us on a bench with his tongue out like he'd never known a bad day. I touched it once in a while. Prepared is different from scared. I hadn't known that before. Sometimes I walked the old route on purpose, only in daylight and with coffee in hand. The new tenants put plants in the windows, a string of lights draped across the glass like a small promise. I don't stare. I hope for them without saying it. May your sandwich be boring, your locks hold. Your dog grumble at raccoons and sleep through everything else. On a January night when the city went quiet the way it only does under heavy snow, I left work early and watched the world shrink to headlights and white. The bus driver leaned forward like he could push the vehicle by will. I stepped down into a drift and felt the cold seam into my boots and laughed for no good reason. At home we did the routine. Broom stripe, locks, kettle, radio low. Cooper sighed on the rug like an old man. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and felt the household. People ask if it's over. It isn't, not like a book with a last page, but it's quieter. Fear is not a siren anymore. It's a smoke alarm that chirps when a battery is low and tells you to take care of something concrete. I smooth the curtain and it stays. I check the door and it clicks. I say home safe into a phone and the words land. On the inside of my front door, there's an index card taped at eye level. 3 words in black marker, home safe now, it's corny. I don't care. When I turn the key at night and see it, my shoulders drop half an inch. When I leave in the morning and see it, I touch the corner with my fingertip like a blessing. None of this makes what happened better. It makes what happens next possible. There's a narrow line between vigilance and living. I walk it with a leash in one hand and groceries in the other. With a neighbor who answers if I text, and a detective who forwards cat photos from a new desk. With a camera that mostly records squirrels, and a door that shuts tight. Winter will come again. It always does. Snow will smooth everything until it looks like the world forgot us. I'll open the door and draw a crooked line, and Cooper will sneeze and wag, and that will be enough to prove we're here. The week after Halloween, our street always goes a little hollow. Decorations droop, porch lights stay off, and the air has that wet leaf smell that clings to your shoes. Monday night, 2018. The house had finally gone quiet. My daughter, Maya, 6, conceded to sleep after I drew the line at a second mini Snickers. Dishes stacked, backpack by the door. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug and my laptop and told myself I'd be in bed by 10. At 9:32, the doorbell rang. No one comes by that late in our subdivision. I stood up, walked to the entry, and checked the peephole. 2 hoodies on the stoop, heads lowered, hands in pockets, faces shadowed under the porch overhang. From height alone, I guessed older teens, but the way they held themselves felt off, like people playing at being kids. One of them let out a tiny staccato laugh, the exact same beat twice as if it was recorded. I kept the chain on. "We're not opening the door," I said through the wood. "Try again tomorrow." They didn't answer. They looked at each other, turned, and drifted down the walk. Not startled, not sheepish, just done. I locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked, and went back to the table. Work documents blinked on the screen. The house hummed. Still, something in me wouldn't settle. It wasn't the knocking. It was the laughter, too precise. 10 minutes later, a new sound tapped at the back of the house. 3 knuckles on glass, spaced perfectly. Then a pause. Then 3 more. The sliding door to our patio sits off the kitchen. The motion light had died in September, and I'd procrastinated replacing it, which I regretted in one hot wave. I slid behind the island, crouched, phone in hand, and watched the door's dark pane. Against the lighter smear of the yard, a deeper shape stood very still. One arm lifted as if testing how the frame responded to pressure. The handle wiggled, soft at first, then with purpose. My phone screen lit my face. Outside, the shape tipped slightly, as if noticing the glow, and drifted out of view. Silence swallowed the kitchen. Then metal kissed wood at a side window. A brief scrape, again closer this time. Bathroom. Then toward Maya's room. I stopped whispering to myself and started moving. I called 911, kept my voice low. Told the dispatcher our street, our house, my kid. "Units are on the way," she said. "Stay off the line of sight." That promise lasted only until I reached Maya's doorway and heard a sound I will always know. A tight little giggle from outside her window. The same clipped rhythm as the front porch. A second voice answered, older, weight in it, too low for words. Through her curtain, 2 shadows pressed against the glass. At the corner of the screen, a small triangle lifted where a blade had cut and tugged. I scooped Maya out of bed, blanket and all, and carried her to my closet on the opposite wall. I closed us in among wool coats and shoeboxes. Her breath warmed my neck. "Quiet game," I whispered. "Don't say a word." She nodded once and went limp again. Kids have a way of believing you if you sound sure. In the front hall, something thin and metallic teased the deadbolt. A scrape, a probing. 30 seconds that stretched until sound fell away. Even the vent seemed to hold its breath. The dispatcher whispered, "They're almost there." Above the hallway, the roof creaked. Our attic access is a pull-down panel with a folding ladder. I'd never once wondered how secure it was from our side. Footfalls eased across shingles, careful, heel to toe, until they paused exactly where the hatch sits. Another board murmured under weight. I imagined a gloved hand testing whether the panel would give. 30 seconds out, the dispatcher said. Sirens grew, blue-red strobing faintly through the gaps in the closet door. The footfalls became scrambling. Then a dull thud at the back like someone dropped to the patio. After that, only the refrigerator's motor, the soft hiss of the furnace, Maya's tiny sleepy snore. We waited until the officers called out inside the house. I carried Maya back to bed and tucked her in. She didn't wake. Flashlights sliced over the flower bed beneath her window. The screen showed a clean 3-inch slice at the frame's corner, prints pressed in the mud, one heavy boot tread, one smaller but still adult-sized with a thick sole, nothing like a teenager's sneaker, at the front door. The lock had faint pick marks, scratches where a tool had slipped and scraped. The slider's track showed new scuffs. The roofline near the hatch had fine grit disturbed into arcs. The next morning, a detective in a wool coat came back and asked if we had cameras. I remembered the budget doorbell my sister insisted on the previous spring. I opened the app, scrubbed the timeline, and there they were, 2 figures. The shorter wore a rubber old man face, wrinkled mask, plastic hair tufting from the forehead. The taller one had a cheap teen face mask strapped on with elastic, but his shoulders and hands were unmistakably grown. While the decoy pressed the bell, the taller one pulled a roll of duct tape from his pocket and glanced down the side of the house toward the gate. The detective's posture changed. He called it in, then explained they'd been mapping similar attempts. Late-night bells. One person at the door to draw you forward. A partner working the dark side of the house, sometimes trying the attic if the roof slope allowed it. The houses had a pattern. Toys in the yard, one adult name on the mailbox, school magnets on the fridge visible from the walkway. 2 nights later, officers in a town up the highway stopped a van after a doorbell captured the same rubber face. The older man was a parolee from out of state who shouldn't have left his county. The younger was his 19-year-old nephew. In the cargo area, zip ties, rope, gloves, a box cutter, tape, a notebook with graph paper full of addresses and notes written like a field journal. Lights out, 10:20. Drop at Cedar Ridge LM, 7:45. Dog, small. Our address sat on the left page with tiny symbols I still don't want to decode. I wrote a statement. Months later, I sat on a wooden bench under cold fluorescent lights and explained the same sequence to a judge. Bell, tapping, laughter, roof, sirens. The older man watched a spot on the wall. He took a deal that kept him gone for a long time. The nephew followed. We moved the next summer. New state. Same lunchbox routine. Better hardware. I learned window pin locks click like safety. A dowel in the slider makes a satisfying thunk. I bolted the attic hatch so it can't be coaxed down without a wrench from inside. We replaced the dead motion light with an overzealous one that flares for leaves and cats. I let it. I'd rather be annoyed than unready. Maya's 9 now. If someone knocks after dark and we don't expect them, we stick to who is it? Through wood and camera. Package? Gets leave it there. Neighbor? Gets which one? She doesn't call it fear. She calls it our routine. She draws at the table while the backyard light startles us, and we laugh when a raccoon turns out to be the culprit. I still walk the house before bed, deadbolts, windows, slider, attic latch. But the ritual feels less like panic now and more like brushing teeth. Boring, necessary. Ordinary? A screenshot of the doorbell clip lives in our important documents folder with passports and birth certificates. Not because I want to look at it, but because it reminds me of 2 things. I didn't imagine anything, and I moved fast enough. We got to morning. Last Halloween, we made it around the new block as a witch and a robot. Candy got counted by color on the living room rug. When the doorbell chimed for the last stragglers, I checked the feed out of habit. Neighbors in puffy coats, grinning kids, nothing else. Maya fell asleep halfway through a movie. I carried her to bed, did my little tour of latches and locks, and texted my sister the message I never skip anymore. Home safe. Storm air has a taste to it. Cold metal on the tongue, electricity behind the teeth. Plattsfield had that taste on a Monday in late October when I stepped onto my porch with coffee and a stack of ungraded tests. The weather app promised 6 to 8 inches by nightfall. The sky had already gone that waxy yellow-gray I'd learned meant stop ignoring the forecast and look for your shovel. 9 days into a new place and everything still felt like a quiz I hadn't studied for. Which switch woke the porch light? Which floorboards tattled when you crossed them after midnight? Which window locked only if you shoved up, then down, then up again? After 26 years with Mark and a divorce decree that arrived like a stamp on a manila envelope, I was playing house in the left half of a cedar-shingled duplex that smelled faintly of old wood and someone else's dinners. Onions. Grease. Something sweet burned onto a pan 20 years ago and now part of the beams. The other half belonged to my landlord, Mr. Lyle, who wore corduroy and wool in every season and waved like we'd known each other in another life. 7th grade math meant I didn't have bandwidth for plumbing mysteries, so his promise, call, come, was part of the rent I was grateful to pay. Somewhere below my living room, a sound scraped the quiet in a patient rhythm. Not the clank of heat, which I'd already learned by ear, but a soft drag pause. Drag pause like someone testing fingernails on concrete. I lay down, cheek against the floorboards, and listened until it stopped. The furnace coughed on. I told myself pipes swell, ducks whisper, old houses talk. I told myself a lot of things that morning. School cut loose at 1:30 for weather. The afternoon concluded in a flurry of kids cheering for a storm day, and teachers pretending not to cheer with them. By the time I turned onto Maple Street, fat flakes made halos in my headlights and hushed the world into a snow globe. Mr. Lyle's sedan was gone. Mondays were for his daughter in Northway, he'd said. I carried a load of firewood in from the covered rack and stepped into a living room that did not look like the living room I had left. Not dramatically. No smashed glass or tossed cushions, just the rug. One corner kicked up. The cheap burgundy square I'd bought on sale last week puckered like it had tried to trip someone. I remembered smoothing it with my palm before school. I remembered the hiss of the nap under my hand. Now it bucked. Also, a smell floated at the edges of the room. Wool left too long in a gym bag. Canned something and a high, sweet note like fruit just past edible. The scraping started again, louder now, as if the house wanted to make sure I heard it this time. It came from directly under where I stood. I dropped wood onto the couch and opened the kitchen door to the basement stairs. The light at the top woke a single bulb below that only managed to illuminate air. "Mr. Lyle?" I called, even though his car wasn't in the drive and his Mondays were never here. The scraping cut off mid-stroke. I stood on that top step long enough to feel the cold creep up through my socks. Old house, old basement. I was a grown woman with a cell phone and a sensible winter coat. Also, there is a stubborn part of me that hates to be the person who calls a landlord away from dinner because a pipe burped. The flashlight lived in the junk drawer next to rubber bands and soy sauce packets. I wrapped my hand around it until the metal warmed and took the stairs, counting boards out of habit. 7 down, a turn, 6 more, concrete, breath. The bulb blinked and held. Basements in houses this age are the same story told with different voices. Stone walls, sweating. Joists veined with old nails. The damp smell of yesterday's rain. Someone had half-heartedly divided the space with plywood. On my side, a furnace with a belt that squealed. A water heater older than my daughter's college aspirations. And metal shelving that bowed in the middle like tired knees. On his cardboard towers labeled in black marker, lights, wreaths, ornaments, stacked against the partition as if they held it up. The flashlight beam found a low, square portal I had not noticed before. A coal chute, concrete framed and iron lipped. The kind that had fed furnaces back when deliveries clattered down alleys. Most had been sealed when oil won its argument with coal. This one was not sealed. The door hung ajar, 6 inches is enough. Shadow pooled inside and fresh marks, dust smeared. Tiny crescents ran from the opening toward the middle of the room, like someone had crawled through and then stood. The smell came full force by that corner, layered and personal. I pulled the door wider with 2 fingers and aimed the light. Blue sleeping bag. Cheap. The kind you can buy in a big box store or find in a trunk at a yard sale. A neat line of empty Chef Boyardee cans. Beef ravioli, the labels fuzzed from damp, stacked in a row. Half-full water bottles laid behind them like reserves. A grocery bag stuffed with something fabric. A phone charger snaked from my wall outlet through the opening and disappeared into the crawl beyond. My hand tightened on the flashlight until it clicked and went off. I smacked it with the heel of my other hand and it came back. There are 2 kinds of fear. I learned in that second. The everyday kind that comes with test scores and bills, and the kind that strips language away so all that's left is motion. I backed up hard enough to clip a shelf and send a metal bracket clanging to the floor. The echo bounced around the stone until silence felt louder. My phone was upstairs on the counter. Ridiculous. I knew better. I turned for the stairs and stopped. The concrete between the chute and the risers kept dust in its cracks like the house's memory. In that fine powder, a set of footprints crossed themselves, heel to toe, bare. Not many, but clear. Another set, smaller or maybe narrower in tread, made by a shoe with a thick sole, crisscrossed them. The bare prints went to the base of the stairs and turned toward the wall, like someone had hugged the corner and stood to listen. I climbed fast enough to feel light in my head, slammed the basement door and levered a kitchen chair under the knob. I called 911 with fingers that kept missing buttons. While the dispatcher asked me my address and name and, "Are you safe right now?" I watched the snow paste against the front window and thought about every night I'd fallen asleep on the couch because climbing to bed seemed far. Every morning I'd chalked an out-of-place coffee mug up to distraction. "Officers are on their way," she said. Her voice was practiced calm. "With the weather, it may take a little longer. Can you secure yourself in a room? Stay away from windows?" I dragged the hall console table with my hip, hustled the armchair across the door, leaned the vacuum against the chair because chaos is a kind of alarm. The scraping started again. Not below! To my right, where the living room windows looked out on the front shrubs, metal edged into wood. I got low, slid across the rug, and tipped a slat of the blinds. Snow blurred the world to shapes. Inside that blur, a man stood close enough that his breath made pearls on the glass. He was thinner than the army jacket suggested, the jacket swallowing him. Gray hair roped past his shoulders, wet and stuck to his cheeks. His beard had grown in wild patches. His lips moved like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. A screwdriver or a thin knife worked at the lower sash. He stopped, lifted his head a fraction, met my eye through the narrow gap as if he'd known exactly where my eye would be, and waited for it. He didn't run. He didn't hide his face. He smiled, and the smile showed teeth that had lost fights with years. He leaned forward until his forehead left a crescent of fog on the pane, then tapped. 3 knuckles, soft, almost companionable. The dispatcher asked, "Is someone there?" I said nothing. Couldn't. The man tilted his head, curious like a bird. He spoke my name, first name, the one on my mailbox in lease. Not loud, not threatening. Just like we were meeting at the grocery store and he'd been the kind to use names. There are small indignities that add up in your body. Finding your mail pilfered. A drawer not closed the way you close it. A rug corner that won't behave. I felt all of them at once. He knew me. He knew the rhythm of my mornings. And the half hour I left the house dark. After dinner and the exact place where I'd hidden the spare key when the locksmith didn't. Pick up. He lifted his other hand and dangled something pinch-gripped between 2 fingers. The brass glinted dull through the snow. My spare. The key I'd tucked under a decorative river rock by the back steps 2 days after I moved in. Because you always need a way in, right? He shook it just a little in case the message hadn't landed, then stepped out of my view and evaporated into the storm. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. "Ma'am, go to a room you can lock, barricade. Officers are 2-3 minutes." My legs moved. I shoved my dresser across the bedroom floor until wood squealed like tires. The sound was the scraping I'd heard that morning exactly, and the realization felt like a second heartbeat. The front door opened. It didn't splinter. It did what doors do when keys slide home and turn. The latch released with a simple, traitorous click. His steps were audible through old wood, heel, paws, toe. He moved like he lived there. Drawer in my kitchen came out and went in. Another. He hummed something tuneless. A cabinet door shut. He wasn't afraid. Or maybe he didn't understand why he should be. Or maybe he did and didn't care. He stopped at my bedroom door and tried the knob with a careful hand. The lock resisted. He rapped politely, knuckles quiet. "Can we talk about the rent?" His voice was calm, conversational, like someone practicing reasonable in a mirror. Sam said I could stay. He promised me. "You came early, Mr. Lyle." I almost laughed and cried at once. "There's no Sam," I said to the dresser more than to him. "You need to leave. The police are on their way." A pause. "We can share," he said as if solving a puzzle. "It's big enough." The weight on the door increased, his shoulder maybe, and the lock plate groaned. The wood around the knob spidered a crack. I put my back to the dresser and pushed, every bit of strength puzzling out as pressure. My knees shook. The dispatcher said, "They're pulling onto your street." And seconds later, the thin wail of sirens found the edges of my hearing like an answer. The pressure vanished. Footsteps reversed through my house. Living room hall front, and the door thudded and then banged open hard enough to hit the wall. Through my bedroom window, a figure became shadow, became motion across white toward the tree line behind the duplex. The jacket flapped like a sail when the wind grabbed it. Snow swallowed him in 3 strides. 3 officers and Mr. Lyle's nephew got me out from behind the dresser. I held a fire poker I didn't remember picking up, and had to be asked 3 times to set it down. The house had been unmade gently. Drawers opened and closed, a cushion shifted, a cereal box left on the counter like a question. Downstairs, the coal chute came into focus for what it was. Entrance, exit, room. The sleeping bag was warmer at one end. The cans were rinsed and stacked. On the plywood near the outlet, pencil marks and neat lines recorded times. Left 7:15, back 4:05. Lights off, just 10:30, and my name with a tentative last initial. A page torn from a pocket calendar held wobbly sketches of my living room window and couch. One rough drawing looked like me asleep with a blanket over my legs. I sat down right there on the concrete and had to be helped back up. The outside mouth of the coal chute hid behind an overgrown juniper at ground level, out of the wind, out of sight. Tracks ran from it into the yard until the storm erased them. Bare footprints and dust inside. A phone cord I recognized from my old place threaded back through the wall and lay coiled near my kitchen outlet. His name, I learned 2 nights later, was Ellis Putnam. People in town knew him by sight. Odd jobs back in the day. Then years of in and out at a state facility. Winters in shelters. Summers in sheds. Mr. Lyle's nephew remembered him hauling shingles on a hot day 15 years ago and being paid in cash and beer. "He's not mean," the nephew said in the shaken way of a person talking themselves into belief. "He's just off. Off is not comfort when you have watched your front door open to a key you thought was yours alone. They didn't catch him that night. Snow moves fast here. It covers like a lie." The officers boarded the chute with screws and steel plate. Mr. Lyle changed the locks that evening and handed me new keys with hands that shook even though he tried to hide it. A patrol car idled across from our curb for 3 straight nights. I slept an hour at a time. On the 4th day, I drove to my sister's in Albany with a duffel and a box of tests I did not grade. I did not go back to the duplex. Mr. Lyle called twice and left messages that started formal and ended with apology. He wanted to argue about the lease, then didn't. A friend of a friend found me a 3rd-floor apartment in a building that had been a mill and now had cement stairs and key fobs and cameras that saw everything, even raccoons in the dumpsters. I missed the creak of old wood for exactly 1 night. A guidance counselor I know texted in January. Ellis had turned up at a shelter in Burlington when the temperature dropped, and the state picked him up on an old order. After that, the text dried up. The world doesn't keep you posted on men like him. I still teach 7th grade math. On snow days, I still make a pot of soup and lay out piles of papers to mark. The new place clicks different, radiators hissing import. Neighbors above me with a toddler who treats morning like a parade. I sleep because I made rules and keep them. The spare key lives at my sister's instead of under anything. The basement in this building is locked and the laundry room is busy, and no door opens without announcing itself. Sometimes early, I stand at the window and drink coffee and take in the light on the street. The air doesn't taste like metal here. It tastes like steam and bread from the cafe downstairs. Every once in a while, when a truck stalls or a radiator bangs or a sound I don't recognize threads through, the memory of that scraping rises, and my body answers with a small heat behind the ribs. It passes. I check the locks because checking is something my hands know now. I send a text to my daughter that says only, "Morning," and take a picture of the snow that is just snow. By November in interior Alaska, the dark feels thick enough to lean on. That night it sat right up against the windshield like another pane of glass, and the cold pressed in from every direction. I'd been running refrigerated loads between Anchorage and Fairbanks for years, long enough to know every crown in the road, and where the highway graders always missed a ridge. I'd pulled into a wide gravel turnout north of Cantwell, killed the headlights and let the engine idle just low enough to keep the sleeper from turning into a meat locker. The rig wasn't pretty, a sun-faded Kenworth with mismatched mirrors and a superstition of lucky talismans taped around the dash. In the bunk I had the usual winter cocoon, 40 bag, wool hat, socks doubled up, a dented thermos tucked by my hip to persuade me I wasn't alone in there, phone on a homemade shelf, flashlight velcroed to the wall, steel bar tucked where my hand could find it without thinking. I checked the dash clock out of habit, 9:42 p.m., and did the math. If I got 6 hours, I could still roll into Fairbanks before the morning thaw made the side streets slick as butter. Silence out there is never really silent. A gust nosed at the trailer from time to time. The engine clicked as it cooled. Somewhere in the black, ice cracked like a knuckle. I drifted. The knocking woke me from a dead fall. 3 knuckles on glass, spaced like someone counting under their breath. 1, 2, 3. I came up so fast I hit my shoulder on the cab wall. The clock said 1:17 a.m. My breath made frost in the air and I had to blink hard to get the sleeper shadows to make sense. Again, another 3 taps. I slid forward into the driver's seat and thumbed the flashlight. The beam carved a clean wedge out of the dark and landed on a man standing just outside my door. He stepped back when he saw movement, lifted a hand in a friendly little wave, and grinned like we were neighbors meeting in a grocery aisle. He wasn't dressed for Alaska in November. Flannel shirt, jeans, an old ball cap, no coat. His cheeks shone wetly. For a second, my brain couldn't reconcile it. Then the light picked up beads of sweat on his forehead, and I watched them freeze to sugar in the cold. I cracked the window just a hair, 2 fingers worth, and kept my palm on the shifter. "Evening," he said, voice steady, conversational. "Sorry to bother you, boss. My car coughed out about a quarter mile back around the bend. Turns over, won't catch. Through a line's finicky in this weather, you know how it is." He wiped his brow. The moisture glazed instantly. "Was hoping you could help me give it a push to that little slope. Once she's rolling, she'll fire. 5 minutes tops. There's an unspoken code on the road. You see hazard lights on a shoulder at 40 below, you stop. I've jump-started strangers and shared coffee out of a cab window more times than I can count. But there are also currents under that code. Things you notice without deciding to notice them. The way someone stands, the way a story repeats like a line learned by heart." My eyes slid to the mirror. I hadn't heard a car pass for hours. On a quiet night out here, you hear everything. Gravel chatter under tires, brakes feathered before a blind curve, the particular throat clearing of an old engine fighting cold oil. If his vehicle had died around the bend, it had done it silently. And pushing a car with a frozen fuel system? That's not a cure. Anyone who lives here knows it. "Where's your jacket?" I asked. His smile flickered and came back too bright. "Left it in the car like an idiot." I got mad and started walking. Figured I'd snag somebody quick. Been moving a bit. Worked up a sweat. He chuckled as if to say, "Look at me, big dummy," and tugged a wallet from his back pocket. He held a photo up to the glass and described it for me like a salesman describing a model I could not see. "Daughter's recital in the morning, violin, first chair. I gotta be back in Fairbanks before she goes on or my wife will skin me." I didn't look at the picture. I scanned the darkness where the beam didn't reach. The edge of the turnout. The tight stand of spruce. Anything that wasn't a night black smear. "Hang tight," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'll call a wrecker from Nenana. They run all night." I made a show of reaching for my phone. The change on his face happened fast and without shame, like dropping a curtain. The grin vanished. The easy cadence flattened. "No need," he said. "Don't waste time or money. Just step out, give me a hand, and you'll be back in your warm bed in 5 minutes." A sliver of motion caught in the passenger side mirror. 30 feet back on the shadow side of my trailer, another shape moved. Low, deliberate, hugging darkness like a friend. If I hadn't turned the mirror just so when I parked, I wouldn't have seen it. The man at the window saw my eyes go off him and rapped the glass harder, loud enough to buzz my teeth. "Hey, eyes here, buddy. Help me out." His right hand dipped toward his hip pocket. I didn't wait to discover what was in it, key on. Glow plugs had no time to do their warm little dance and I didn't care. The engine turned over like a bear dragged out of a cave, and then caught with a hash of smoke. I dropped the parking brake. The hiss of air releasing filled the cab. The man jumped back, face rearranged into something more honest. Surprise edging quickly toward anger. In the passenger mirror, the shape by the trailer sprinted hard for the trees. My headlights washed over the turnout as I swung the nose, and that's when I saw the rest of it. A dark pickup tucked tight into the spruce, engine already running, exhaust puffing steadily. Somebody sat behind the wheel, a profile lit by the faint blue of a screen. No broken down sedan, no problem to push. A trap that depended on me opening a door. I rode the clutch just enough not to spin on the packed gravel, felt the big tires bite and eased onto the highway, then fed it. The beam from my high beam scooped out a tunnel, and the white lines flowed under me like a bad dream you outrun by waking up. For 10 miles I lived in my mirrors, waiting for headlights where there shouldn't be any. Nothing followed. At least nothing I could prove with glass and chrome. When my hand stopped shaking enough to hit the toggle, I flipped the CB to 19. Northbound on the parks past Cantwell, I said. Heads up at the pullout north of mile 218. Pair of fellas knocking on doors. Black pickup tucked in the trees. Don't stop. The channel is usually weather and boredom, and the kind of jokes that don't survive sunlight. Went quiet for a beat, then lit with two drivers' voices confirming they'd seen a truck easing in and out of the spruce earlier. Like an animal testing a fence. 40 minutes later, a voice came on that half the state knows by his handle, Kodiak Bear, steady as a drum. Heads up at Broad Pass Rest, he said. Guy left his unit idling to hit the latrine. Came back to 2 in the cab. Got stomped trying to pull him out. Load's gone. Troopers say he's lucky. 20 minutes more and he'd have frozen stiff. Silence again, the heavy kind. We all do the math on our own runs, our own bad luck. I made Fairbanks at daybreak on coffee and adrenaline and that thin wire of stubbornness you string between deadlines. At the dock, I handed off the bill of lading with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. Then drove straight to the trooper's post and filed a report. A woman there, mid-40s, eyes sharp, uniform neat in a way that said habit, not vanity, took notes without looking surprised. You did right, she said. If you think it's weird, it is. Trust that. She thumbed through an incident ledger, frowned slightly. We'll run patrols through that stretch tonight. These crews work the shoulder inventory like it's a big box store. Fuel, batteries, catalytic converters if they're brazen. Freight too if they get lucky. They're counting on you wanting to be decent. I told her about the sweat. It bothered me in a way I couldn't shake, like an unsolved riddle. People sweat when they're scared, she said. They also sweat when they're keyed up for something. You saw the second shadow. Your gut closed the loop. Back at the truck stop, I sat in the cafeteria with a plate I barely touched and watched snow gather in the truck lot like salt. Every few minutes a rig would ease out, chains chattering, and I'd feel the old pull to be out with them. The road a long black ribbon that made sense in a world that didn't always. The crowbar rode the rest of the week in the bunk within easy reach, and I swear the metal warmed to the idea of being useful. Since that night, I don't open my window for anyone at zero dark who wants to talk about 5 minutes. My help lives on the horn and the phone now. I'll call you a wrecker. I'll get a trooper rolling your way. I'll throw you a gas can from a distance that makes us both honest. I still stop for rigs lit up like Christmas on bad nights, but I stop in the lane with my hazards punching, keep the door locked, and talk through glass. If someone is truly stranded, they're grateful for any voice in the dark. If they're hunting, they don't like being seen that big and that loud. There's a pullout north of Cantwell I don't use anymore. It looks the same as it always did. Flat spot, trees snugged close, a bite of wind that cuts your cheeks like paper. But once you hear knuckles on your glass in the small hours and feel a story trying to hook into you, a place changes shape. I run another 20 miles on tired eyes rather than put the rig to sleep there. Give me a plowed lot with floodlights and a coffee machine that lies about how fresh it is. Give me company on the channel and diesel ticking as it keeps itself liquid. Give me 6 hours without 3 knocks. The thing that sticks isn't the face or the words, it's the exact pivot point. When a friendly mask dropped like a stage prop and a different script came on. I still help when I can. You can't do this job if you won't. But the days when a hand at my window could pull me out into the cold because I didn't want to feel rude are over. In this part of the world, you learn to weigh your kindness without setting it down. You learn to name the small alarms and honor them. And on the nights when the dark presses against the glass hard enough to flex it, you put your faith in thick doors, hot engines, and the word no. The break sold itself the second I saw the ad. 3 nights, no phones, nervous system reset. I'd been living in a blur of pings and meetings for months, sleeping in 10-minute slices and calling it rest. Cheap rate, and a photo of cedar siding and soft fog were enough. I booked it between emails and told myself I'd finally breathe. 2 weeks later, I was driving a 2-lane that kept tightening, GPS spinning, hills shouldering out the last of the daylight. A hand-painted sign finally appeared, Cedar Hollow Quiet, nailed crooked to a post with lichen on it. My phone lost bars, then the clock. I told myself that was good. It meant I couldn't cheat. The lodge sat in a ring of firs, porch sagging, rocking chairs scuffed to bare wood. Inside, warm lamplight, pine cleaner, A desk where a woman in oatmeal-colored scrubs greeted me by name before I offered it. "We'll secure your devices during your stay," she said, already sliding a numbered envelope across the counter. The sticker on it read, in cheerful script, "Surrender to stillness." A second staffer watched my phone go in, the way a bank teller watches a deposit. A cotton set waited on a shelf, loose pants, long-sleeve top, and a plastic tag that said Ella in block letters. "Uniforms simplify things," the woman said, smiling like she'd said it 1,000 times. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. We all wore the same soft beige, long tables, bowls passed hand to hand. The food was good in a way that made you suspicious. Stew, bread still warm, tea that tasted like flowers. A staff line stood along the wall, hands folded, not eating. I tried a joke with the woman on my left about how it felt like adult summer camp. She gave a polite smile and said, barely moving her lips, "It's easier when you let the words go." Then she looked at the staff like she'd said too much. A bell woke us before the sun. We filed into the courtyard in pairs, breath clouding in the chill. A man introduced himself as Guide Rowan. He spoke in a slow, round tone about digital toxins and natural timing, and something in the way he didn't blink made my shoulders go tight. "How long is the program?" I asked when he paused for the first time. "You'll know," he said, as if he'd answered. The day ran on rails. Walk the loop trail in single file, stop at stones with painted spirals, write a sentence about release, feed it to a fire under supervision. Every analog clock I saw said the same hour, though the light kept changing. A whiteboard by the stairs listed our cadence: stillness, nourishment, integration, rest. The staff repeated the words like they were more than labels. When I asked another guest how many days she'd been here, she lowered her gaze and said, "I stopped counting." Then she smiled the way people do in family photos when they're not actually happy. By late afternoon, the quiet started to show its seams. A man paced the hall, rubbing his thumb raw. Someone stood at a window for a very long time, eyes on the gate at the end of the gravel. I tried the latch myself during solo reflection. A heavy chain ran through the bars, padlock big as my palm. The road beyond was empty both directions, the kind of empty that feels curated. I went to the desk and asked for my phone. The young guy there didn't meet my eyes. "You consented to a device-free experience," he said, as if he were reading off a page. "You'll get it back when you complete." Two staffers slid into the doorway behind him without sound. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody had to. I spent the rest of the day with a cold spot between my ribs. Night in the room put the shape of the place in sharper relief. The walls were thin enough that I could hear footsteps in the hall, soft and timed, like people trading posts. Around midnight, a low, steady hum threaded through the trees outside. Not a generator hum, a pulse the way a refrigerator cycles, but bigger, more deliberate. I opened my door a hand's width, and two staff members stood at the end of the corridor, facing my room. One lifted a finger to his mouth. I closed the door and pushed the chair under the knob, suddenly tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Morning came with one less body in the dining hall. The bed across from mine was made perfectly, tag hook empty. When I asked a cleaner where the woman had gone, she said she completed her process and kept folding a sheet I'm pretty sure was already folded. The phrase showed up again at lunch on the whiteboard. Completion is peace. By now, every sentence they used felt like an umbrella that hid the weather. I decided leaving was more important than being polite. At the long table that night, I kept a spoon and slid it into my sleeve. During the group meditation, I breathed with everyone else and watched their eyelids from a slit. When Guide Rowan started his long exhale, I slipped out a service corridor that smelled like bleach and wet wood. A steel door at the back opened to a slice of yard and the chain link. The spoon wasn't much, but it leveraged the chain enough that a link lifted off the latch. Noise ripped the dark. I froze, nothing moved. The hum pressed through the trees. I pushed the gate an inch, then my shoulder, then I was outside. No streetlights, no signs. Just the road unspooling into dark timber. The sound of my own breathing. The small whine my shoes made on grit. I walked fast until walking fast became running in bursts. Until my chest hurt. Until I heard tires long before I saw the truck. The driver slowed on instinct at the sight of a woman in soft beige waving both arms. "Car trouble," I said. "Hiking lost," I said. He didn't ask more. We rode in the kind of silence you earn. The police in town were kind in that practiced way, the way of people who hear hard stories. Where is this place? I gave them the turnoffs, the crooked sign, the hour from the highway. They pulled up county records, tax maps, nothing. No permit for a lodge under that name. No business listing for Cedar Hollow Quiet. We drove out anyway, 2 cruisers and the trucker following, and turned down 3 wrong roads and one right one that ended at a locked gate with fresh tire marks. Beyond it, trees, fog, hollows where buildings might have been and were not now. The hum was gone. Back home, the website that had taken my deposit returned a blank page. The email bounced. The receipt on my credit card listed a shell name that, when I looked it up, belonged to a mailbox in another state. I still have the plastic tag with my name on it, the corners scuffed from rubbing against the uniform seam. Sometimes it slips out of the drawer when I'm looking for a pen and sits in my palm like a coin from a country that doesn't exist anymore. I keep thinking about the woman who told me to let go of words and the way her eyes flicked to the staff like a reflex. I think about the clocks that refused to move, the gate staged to look simple, the hum that felt like a hand on a metronome. Mostly I think about how ordinary it all looked at first. Soup and tea and soft clothes, and how easy it was to mistake control for care. I sleep now with my phone on the nightstand and the ringer on. The woods behind my apartment crack and sigh the way woods do. Every so often, when the wind threads the branches just right, a low sound rides it. Barely there, almost nothing. My chest tightens the way a body remembers. I get up, check the lock, look out at the trees. The dark holds, the hum fades, and in the morning I put the tag back in the drawer, shut it softly, and choose to believe that silence belongs to me again. Off-season turns a shoreline into a different country. The air goes metallic, gulls give up their arguments, and the water feels wider. I'd booked a last-minute freelance stay in late November 2022, 2 quiet weeks to finish a photo series, at a shingled cottage outside a working harbor town in Maine. Weathered gray siding, sea glass shutters, a porch that faced the Atlantic. The listing looked like a place you could slow your pulse. Inside smelled of salt and old paper. Downstairs held a stubby kitchen and a small living room with a window toward the dunes. Off the hall were 2 bedrooms and a scuffed staircase that climbed to a door stenciled, "Storage. Do not enter." The host's welcome note mentioned the top level was sealed after old storm damage. Fine by me. I wanted tides and light, not mysteries. That first day, I walked the Strand until my cheeks went numb. Eiders rode the chop. A red buoy bell clunked a slow rhythm beyond the bar. By dusk, the wind began its winter vowels through the clapboards, a voice older than the house. I made tea, edited until my eyes sanded over, then drifted asleep on the couch to the hiss of the ocean and the occasional pop from the baseboard heat. Footsteps woke me. Light ones measured, crossing directly above where I lay, heel, toe, pausing near the wall, continuing back. Not the wind, not the oil burner, not anything the house had done in the day. I sat upright, heart going too loud in my own ears, and the steps stopped. Silence wheeled in, the kind that has weight, then music. Faint, thready, a melody with the bones of a waltz, fluttering like it came through plaster or long distance, warped the way an old record bends time. The hair on my forearms prickled. I killed the lamp so I could hear, held my breath, and tried to pin the sound to a corner. It rose and thinned, as if someone kept touching a volume knob. I took the flashlight and climbed. The stairs complained under my socks. At the top, the painted door waited, dull and ordinary. As my hand closed around the knob, the music shut off like a switch. No rebound echo, no last note, just gone. I pressed my ear to the wood. A faint shift, a single drag of something against boards, as if a person pivoted. Then one thump, sole or palm, into the other side of the door. I backed down the steps until the banister found my spine. Hand shaking, I slid the deadbolt across my bedroom door, lay on the coverlet fully dressed, and listened to the weather scrub the siding until the gray edge of morning unrolled. Daylight bleaches fear if you let it. Coffee helped. I made myself laugh out loud and labeled the night's racket House plus Wind in the Notes app. Then I walked the perimeter with my camera, supposedly scoping angles. really looking for explanations. 3 small upstairs windows stared down under nailed boards, paint lifting off them like old scabs. When I touched a corner, my fingers came away black with fine soot, and the faint tang of char drifted out, a smell I hadn't noticed on arrival. I messaged the host. Might there have been maintenance upstairs last night? Heard music. A reply landed before the steam left my mug. There is no usable upstairs. It burned in 2009. The space is sealed. Please do not attempt to access it. I reread that note 3 times. The staircase exists. The door exists. The ceiling above my couch exists. I typed thank you, I won't, and turned the phone face down like I could stop words from meaning anything by blocking the screen. I avoided the stairs all afternoon. Cooked with the radio up, edited with headphones. At midnight, the wind turned again, bringing kelp and wood smoke through the cracked sash. I scrolled through the day's shots, stopping at one frame of the east eave where the boards crossed an upper window. The pane had thrown back a crooked wedge of sky, and in that wedge, behind the glass, a pale oval. Not clear enough to name. Not a flaw I recognized. Not a trick of reflection, I told myself, then didn't believe myself. I slept with the lights on, which is to say I didn't sleep. At 3, the same footsteps started, same tempo as before. I counted them. 22 across, pause, 22 back, as if numbers could domesticate them. No music that time, just movement. I pictured mice. I pictured raccoons. None of my pictures walked like a person. Morning. I circled the house again with a new hypothesis and a flat bar from the trunk. Along the lee side under the eave, I found a narrow hatch half hidden by shingles. Rusted nails sunk deep by years of weather. Not new work. When I pried gently at the edge, more soot breathed out, dry and sour, like the ghost of wet plaster burned long ago. Something inside the dark banged lightly once. Not a knock, more like a bump, like someone's elbow grazing a hollow wall as they turned. That was my line. I packed a day early, wrote the host that a family emergency had come up, and scrubbed my name off the chalkboard by the door where the house asked you to leave a note. Before I turned the key, I stood at the bottom of the stairs and said out loud, "I'm leaving now." It felt ridiculous and necessary at exactly the same time. The road back to town ran tight between pines. In the rear view, the cottage shrank, the porch a square mouth, the upstairs windows boarded eyes. As I took the final bend, one board seemed to change its angle by a degree, like a lid opening a slit. I did not turn around to check whether that was wind or wishful dread. Weeks later, home, I processed the last roll of 35mm. 12 frames I remembered, and one I didn't. The extra shot was a hallway I had never stood in, narrow, paneled. The lower half of the walls scorched and blistered, the upper half clean. Light slanted from the left as if an unbroken window lived out of frame. At the end of the hall sat an old gramophone on a little pedestal table, its brass horn whole, its turntable spinning. A needle glinted where it met the record's edge. The exposure was clean. The perspective was mine. I hadn't pressed the shutter on that place. I boxed the negative and the print in a shoebox, taped it shut, and slid it to the back of a closet. Once or twice, a storm will sling its weight against my building, and the heat pipes will knock in threes, and for a second I'll hold my breath for the rest of the pattern. The paced walk, the pause, the return. Sometimes, with the windows closed and the city too loud to bear, I hear the memory of a waltz. Not a tune I know, not a song I could hum, just a measure or two bent by age and distance, coming from under a door a stranger labeled storage years ago. A door I did not open. If anyone asks why I cut the gig short, I say the weather changed early and I needed better light. It's easier than telling someone that the ocean keeps its own time, and some houses keep theirs too. That sometimes you knock and nobody answers, and sometimes you don't knock at all and something presses back from the other side as if to say, "I'm already here."